we're calling in. We're getting the meeting going, we just want to make sure you're there. Mark, can you hear us okay?
Yes,
Okay,
I sure can.
okay. We just had roll call, so we're moving forward.
All right.
Next order of business, approval of agenda as presented.
I'll make that a motion.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
I would request a couple agenda additions.
Well, I was waiting for you there.
Based on the information I sent out on Friday, so we have Brian Shively's lease agreement. I would also like to include the bill of sale on that, because that goes hand in hand with the lease agreement. And then the grant agreement addendum number 1, or modification number 1, for our property acquisition grant. That was also included in that email.
Do I hear a motion to add those items to the agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Do I hear a second?
I'll support that amendment.
Do I hear a vote for yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Any nays? Motion passed. Public comment? We do have one person down there? No? Okay, we'll pass, continue going. Okay, next business, approval of January's minutes. I presume everybody has gotten a chance to, has gotten them and had a chance to read them, review them. Any changes, additions, subtractions?
Make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Here.
Okay. Motion presented and seconded. Do I hear a yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Any nays?
yes, yes,
Yes, yes, thank you. So that makes it unanimous. Thank you, Mark. Okay,
okay.
okay, moving on, the Treasury Report for December. Everybody's got a copy of, well, December's on here because we didn't have it last month, and so it's going to be approved, reviewed and approved today, then we'll go on to the January one. So everybody got a copy of the December one in their packet, and there's a chance to review it. Any comments, concerns, questions?
I just have some questions as to some things I don't know if there were adjustments made after the December to the January,
Yeah,
the
let's
year-to-date
approve that.
balances
Right,
don't.
Yeah, let's approve the December and then we'll go over the January. Can we approve the accounts payable for December? Or you gotta do it all together?
We're doing the accounts payable, we already approved the revenue and expenses.
Right,
I
so
believe
in,
last
so in
time, so-
January, if you look at,
No, let's go back and approve the accounts payable for December, then we'll run to January, how's that sound?
Well, is there any questions on the December?
I just need to understand, because looks like there's been some
Yeah,
accounting
there's
changes
two
from
adjustments.
December, so the year-to-date
Right.
numbers to January don't foot
Right.
anymore.
right, and that was the adjustments to get ready for the audit. So money that we received in, November was actually for, August and September. So we had to do that adjustment to put it into the right periods. So then this number that's in here for January is reflective, truly reflective what October, November, December, and January are.
Andrew, did you, because I've noticed a change in numbers too, and so I was gonna ask.
So like the federal grant, for example, was a big one. So the 535, 814.50 that's showing up now, that's truly what was paid. time period, October, November, December, and January.
So that extra 170 is now gonna be shown the
Right,
prior fiscal year?
right, yes, for September, yeah. So that got, yeah, booked as a receivable and then reversed back out.
So do we wait until the audit's done before the board will see those final numbers?
Right, like when the audit's done, I'll bring in the new September ending numbers so we can compare those with the new trial balance for September. And then this total here is what truly is reflective to the activity that's happened.
Year to
October,
date.
no, right. October through January. So like you'll see that negative rental, that was actually for last fiscal year, but it got counted because I hadn't reversed that AR yet. So the 1,082.61 is truly what we've received for this time period, for year to date.
And the marketing for public charters? Because for December it was
Right, that's
nothing,
for
and then,
2 months, yeah.
but current month was $2,500, but year-to-date's
So,
25,000.
right, because we didn't get paid anything the last month, it was the previous month. So we got money like in October. So
The
this
year-to-date for December was 0.
I'll have to look at that one. Because he gave us a check that included the 2 months.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if somehow we got an extra 0 in the year-to-date column for January.
For which one?
Marketing public charters, because it was 0 year-to-date December,
Oh, yeah, that should be
and
2,500.
and then it looks like we got an
Okay.
extra 0 in the year-to-date column.
It's 2,500, I can fix that.
What page are you on?
I'm looking at the,
January 2020 revenue and expense, is that correct?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
and then there's
And
just.
there might be more
Mhm.
adjustments. The audit is 2 weeks? In 2 weeks. Yeah, in 2 weeks, so there might be more adjustments later after we get through the audit.
So,
So this is a different audit than what we had like 2 months ago?
Yes, that was for the hospital, I'm sorry, for the county,
Oh, okay,
and then the airport gets a separate audit
so that's coming up this month, maybe, is
Yeah.
what you said?
in like 2 weeks.
So you're switching a lot of numbers around and everything else, trying to get,
Yeah, we're trying to get it to be the true reflective.
so will that audit then give the board a listing of all the prior period adjusting entries?
I can get that.
okay, that'd be good. So, I guess, where do we go today?
Can I just ask why were these so mixed up? Just not kept up with, or?
No,
Well, I'd
The
say
grant
part
was
of it
very
is,
far behind.
this is your first year going
Right.
through this, so there's a learning curve on it.
And
But-
also, I didn't know how much the grant was billed, which then I got from Barry, so
Mhm.
that way I could put in the right numbers. And then we finally did get paid last month for some of that.
So you feel confident that going forward, we're right on track?
And this is also typical of during the audit process,
Cleaning up.
cleaning up into the proper accounting period, so.
Good question, Karen, I was gonna ask that too, because I've had some of this question. So, I guess we go ahead and have a roll call to approve the December.
Need a motion and
Oh, I need a
support
motion,
first.
okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the December 2019 accounts payable?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second,
Okay, roll call please. This is for the December 2019 accounts payable.
Mr. Dutz,
yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Haw.
Yes. Okay, moving on to the January 2020 accounts payable. Everybody's seen or had a chance to review that report?
Do you approve them per report or the whole?
Well, per report, we'll do the accounts payable, then we'll do the revenues and expenses.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we accept the January 2020 accounts payable.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Dents,
Yes.
Mr. Suda.
Yes.
Okay, moving on to the January 2020 revenue and expenses. Everybody's had a chance to review that?
We have discrepancy in it though, so,
Yeah, how about if I fix that and I'll include it after
25,000 compared to 2,500, so both numbers are off. Did you have something else too? Yeah.
Did you have prior period adjustments for advertising and utilities as well?
Yes. I had to go back and look at all the bills and pull out the September ones.
And you had adjustment in there for the federal grant,
Yep.
AEAS from December to January, right?
Yep.
Because it's kind of confusing trying to go through all this stuff.
No, sorry.
So anyway, you want to just hold off on approval till next month? Will that work for everybody? Okay.
Do you need to make a motion to hold on?
I think so.
Okay, moving on. Executive committee, we got met, well, it did meet last month. Budget committee did not meet. And the capital projects committee did not meet. But we do have something that we're gonna talk about down the road here about signing or reviewing and signing the lease for Mr. Shively and the sale of the property so that we can do the lease. And that's in the old business that we modify here on the agenda.
But actually, if we could now, I think it would be appropriate to talk about the land lease policy,
Oh, okay,
because that, the committee asked me to update and get back with those changes, which I had sent to you on Friday as well. That's separate from
I look
the hangar transaction with Mr. Shively, because that's our policy.
I'd like to make a comment on that.
go ahead.
I think the airport lease and the bill of sale were well written.
Well, thank you, Mark. I can't take credit. I can give that credit to our attorney. But right now, what I'm bringing to attention to the board is the land lease policy, which is a 2-page document that's redlined, that's showing the updates from the current 1999 policy. So it was sent out, but I'll give everybody a copy as well.
Okay, that's same as what's in the big packet, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
It would be nice if the board could approve these changes unless the board desires further changes, because the current policy from '99 isn't really reflective of the current state of affairs, and the proposed lease would not conform to the existing policy. Specifically, the existing policy says all leases must end in 2033.
Is that the time frame is up then? I mean, how did we pick, we just picked that date
We picked,
according to the previous leases, so is that the time frame?
I'm assuming that, I mean, since that was adopted in '99, predates all of us
Right.
being here.
Right.
I'm assuming is that's, the two existing leases end that date, so I'm assuming that's where that came from.
I want nothing coming out of the woodwork.
So, should we be recognizing like in schedule on 2, as opposed to 2003, should it be 2020? Reflecting today's date, if this is adopted today?
The date on the lease is actually effective as of December 1st of 2019, which is why I used that date. Because I didn't want it to be ambiguity by picking a date that was when it was approved, but not when it was effective. And the reason George was recommending a retroactive effective date is because Mr. Shively has actually been operating as if this agreement was in place and has, already been making changes to the hangar, even though technically it hasn't been his right to do that until this is approved. And I can, talk through the changes that were discussed in the committee, if you'd like. I don't think they're,
Can I just,
Sure.
with insurance, leasee required to carry insurance on premise policy on file with airport. How about if we put current, I mean, we should probably check that every year, to
Mhm.
make sure they sustain it, so maybe a current policy on.
okay? So I can add the
Does that
word
make sense?
current
Yeah.
before the word policy.
Yeah. That way we know to check it
Yep.
every year. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other changes anybody sees or recommendations? Go ahead.
I got a question. The paragraph, I guess we'll call paragraph 1, lease rate, wouldn't that be more properly titled annual lease rate?
Sure.
I mean, wouldn't that be
Yes,
more
I
proper?
mean, it is annual, yes.
And I guess the other thing is modifications, that number 9, elimination, is that thought to be taken care of in number 8? Number 8 takes care of what number 9 would have been? Is that what the intent was there?
No, the idea there is to treat the building of new structures separately from the scenario we're dealing with here, where it's a significant modification to an existing structure. So the wording is similar, but not identical.
Well, where's modifications then in the new policy?
Number 9 is,
Eliminated.
no, it's added.
Here's for the new structure, and then there's modifications.
Yeah, but with, the red is
Added.
added, okay.
If it has a line through it, that means it's,
Perfect.
underline means it's added.
Wonderful, got it.
Okay, anything else?
So we have to approve this?
Yes, yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the Manistee County Blacker Airport Land Lease Policy amended February 10th, 2020.
Do I hear a second on that?
Second.
With the two
I was gonna say, I think
suggested
it's that second with
changes.
the two,
Yeah.
and then changes there.
Right. We get 2 additional changes.
Let's have a roll call on that.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Mr. Hawk,
Yes.
Mr. Dents,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom.
Yes.
You got everybody? just continue going into the rest of this? The airport land lease transfer agreement, before we move on to your,
Let's do my report and then we can switch back.
okay, Barry, you've got the floor.
Okay. So I, just passing out copies. No accidents or incidents to report for the month. Page 2 is showing our enplanements and airline performance. And you'll see that we've taken a significant hit in January, but it's kind of what you expect when you cancel half of the month's flights. 52% of the flights of the month were canceled. There was only one delay of the remaining, but overall, you know, as was reported last month, this is what was anticipated to happen and did. And I'll give more updates as to where we are in a little bit in February. And
Do we run any kind of like something for all those persons that, I know it's expensive, but you know, that didn't get their flight? It was canceled on, they get their money back?
they get their money back.
It's like, here's a free packet of peanuts or something?
Nope.
It's just that, you know, it's just trying to not lose those customers.
Right.
You know, I'm just thinking what incentives you can get to say, okay, they canceled, but, you know, I'll stick with them.
Next page, airfares is, as of this past weekend, you know, overall, the trends are consistent with where we've been. Fares on Southwest out of Midway and Delta were actually a little bit better than they've been, so it kind of brought some of the Deltas in line. But as we've been seeing, the low fare airports are Grand Rapids and Traverse City. There's currently about a $20 difference between those two. We fall in third, and then Muskegon being the most expensive of the neighboring airports. When you factor in, you know, parking, which is just kind of something we offer for free that most airports don't, that levels the playing ground significantly. I mean, it really puts Grand Rapids, Traverse City, and us pretty much on the same, you know, playing field. Muskegon is still an outlier there. And one of the things that actually drove our average fare up this month was the fare to Las Vegas for the days that I'm looking at here. I don't know why, but pretty much every Southwest flight out of Midway to Las Vegas that day was fairly sold out. All of the low fares were gone, so that probably ended up pushing up our average probably by about $10 across the 20, because there was at least a $200 difference in what that typically would have been. So the fare out of Manistee for that was almost $700 to Vegas, whereas all the other airports were, you know, around $400. So so overall, not bad. You know, it would always be nicer for us to see that we're the lowest, because that helps to then compensate for other issues that we have in having service here. Any questions on the airfares?
Not a question on the airfare, this is probably a long shot, but the current situation, does the airport have any sort of business interruption insurance or anything that might qualify in this situation?
I'm not aware of anything, no. I do not think so, because I've never seen that in our property policy.
That'd be nice.
Probably cross-prohibitive.
Moving on, so the state winter conference for airports is next week in Lansing. In the past, I've always invited board members down if they would like to attend. I would certainly offer and encourage that this year. It's next Wednesday and Thursday. Generally, there's an evening event that night of the 19th to attend as well. So if anyone wants to, let me know and I'll get you registered and we can make that happen. Our PFAS update. So where we stand right now is that last spring we were awarded a $21,000 grant through now Eagle in joint with MDOT on that. And that would cover the cost of the equipment. Still leaving training and installation to be on our dime. Last summer, I had attempted to work with Muskegon Airport to try to see if we could share equipment and basically use these grant dollars. So instead of buying and get another $21,000 worth of equipment, sharing what they have, and then using the grant dollars to cover the training and installation. Well, ultimately, Muskegon said, sure, that'd be fine with us. The state said no, because the terms of the grant don't allow it to be spent on anything other than equipment. So what I've done is last month was the submittal for the annual grants that we get from the state. And typically there's $10,000 which we use for marketing, and then there's an additional up to $10,000 if funds are available for other things. I applied for that grant in the other things category to cover this. So what I heard in talking to the state on Friday was it looks like we're going to get that. So I'm just now working with the vendor. I've got the quote, getting everything in line, because that first grant expires the end of March, so we need to make sure that we've got all the paperwork ready for that. So that's where that all stands. I don't have any update on the fuel system monitor today. As it relates to Ted Aaron's hangar, the need for that hangar obviously dissipated when we don't have the airplane it was supposed to house even here yet. But Ted reached out to me via email last week and indicated that he'd still be willing to work with us and donate the hangar in exchange for having some other place to store his stuff. Kind of along the terms that we had been talking to him back in December. Basically taking the hangar over as is, then it becoming our responsibility to repair the door so that we could potentially use it for something revenue generating.
Well, that's good, he's leaving that door open.
What's the issue with the door?
Go ahead.
As a new board member, I can, I'll fill you in, try to do it quickly. So the issue was going to be that to fit a 1900 in there, the tail is not going to fit. And when we were doing measurements, we weren't thinking in 3 dimensions and realizing that since it's a bifold door, as it opens, it sticks out yet another 9 feet, which actually impedes things. So Public Charter's plan was to lease that hangar from Ted for the winter and to actually remove the door and then reinstall it in the spring when they don't need it anymore, to basically allow as much use of the hangar as possible. When they brought someone out here to do an estimate for what that would cost, the gentleman is a installer for Schweiss Doors, which is the brand on there, and noticed that that door was improperly installed when it was originally installed 20 years ago. And there's been water infiltration into it, and it is rusting, and there's potential structural issues with basically the main structure of the door. And Schweiss came back when they were notified of this saying, you know, don't use the door. So that is the door issue. Now, I think it is likely that the door can be repaired, probably not in a way that the manufacturer would ever recertify it. So thinking through what that would be, but potentially getting an asset that could be used by the airport. And as you saw from our policy, that hangar reverts to the airport in 2033 anyway. So it's just really bringing in that date from then to sooner to potentially allow the airport to use it for something else. So that's the hangar door issue in a nutshell.
Was there a price that these people came up with to fix it? Or whatever, or
They were basically didn't want to deal with fixing it. They would be more than happy to sell a new door.
I see, got it,
So,
understood.
so I think that if I recall, the price was like $8,000 to take it off and rehang it.
Correct.
But then there was another cost to repair it. And I think that zoomed up astronomically,
I'm sure it did.
right? To have them satisfy a repair that they would certify, recertify.
And that's the key, is the liability and what is qualified as a repair. But in seeing what Mr. Shively is doing with his hangar, I'm quite confident that we could get a working door for much less than the price of a new door. But thinking through the liability issues and how that would work is,
That might be one of those things that you simply want the job to do it, otherwise you're not gonna certify it.
right.
So tit for tat.
Any other questions on these items? So, land acquisition. So, again, this is an item later on new business, but I've been reporting that we were waiting for the relocation costs to be pulled together for Mr. Adamczyk, which are reimbursable under federal policy for this type of transaction. That came together in January, and in some ways unbeknownst to me, it actually got submitted to MDOT by our consultants and approved by the Aeronautics Commission at their meeting on January 31st. So there is a grant amendment number 1 in the amount that is on the paperwork that I included in my Friday update. And that includes the roughly $44,000 in relocation expenses, and it also includes some remaining expenses from our first submittal that did not get reimbursed. So the total of that is approximately $50,000. That's already been approved by MDOT Aeronautics Commission. They didn't get the paperwork to us in time for this meeting, so I'm basically going off of kind of the appendix that kind of shows the numbers for what the ultimate document is going to be. The challenge is that this is a grant for reimbursement. So we need to actually pay the $44,000 bill first so that we can then get it reimbursed.
Where are those funds coming from?
That's, what I'll say is that typically our funds, we tap into county funds for things like this, but I'm making sure that the board knows that this is what we are actively doing. But because it's already been approved by the state, we just have to get the formal documents, which we should have this week, get those signed back to them, then we can submit, and then it's a matter of getting, the payment on it. So for that piece, it should be within 30 days of getting reimbursement from that. Susan and I can work together on pulling that together. But that is what ultimately needs to be approved later, is both the grant agreement or amendment and then authorizing payment of the expenses for the relocation.
So we have to get money from the county, then we can go ahead and get the
Correct.
rest of it.
Correct.
Just, isn't important, but what did he have on this property that cost that much to relocate?
They pretty much cover everything. I mean,
Yeah, livestock.
I mean, there were livestock, I mean, there was, I mean, he had an auction, you know, he had hall fees, I mean, there's a, and then plus, I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that's allowed. It becomes a way, I mean, it's, I mean,
A lot of padding.
there's a lot of padding, but it makes these processes generally go smoother so that you don't have to be forced to result to eminent domain to take the property, that there's incentive for people to sell willingly. I was a little bit surprised at the number as well, but. Now, unfortunately, as I said, Preen and Newhoff submitted this all to the state that they had, and I really wasn't in the loop on that. So I didn't even know that this was going before the Aeronautics Commission at their meeting at the end of January until I talked to Preen and Newhoff last week, because it was last week where Susan finally got the legal expenses from Mika Myers for the transaction, which are also reimbursable. So this is going to require a second grant amendment they meet every 2 months, so in March. So we should see reimbursement for those legal expenses, which are about $4,000 in April. And then just kind of winding things out is going back to our FAA sponsorship challenge with the airport. There's about $10,000 to $11,000 of expenses that we incurred through that process that will be reimbursable at a future date. And it's money we've already spent. So that's just kind of hanging out there as dollars. I anticipate that will get reimbursed as part of the airport layout plan update. A lot of the stuff that was done there was survey work, and all of those types of things are also part of the airport layout plan update, so it's really just getting reimbursed for things that we did a few years ago as now part of this project. So, putting rough numbers to all this, so the relocation costs for Mr. Adamczyk around $44,000, which we need to pay. The remaining expenses from the first reimbursement are about $6,000, which we've already paid and will be getting back then. The second grant amendment, which will be necessary, will get us repaid on about $4,000 in expenses that we've already paid. And then by the end of the fiscal year, I would anticipate getting reimbursement on that about $11,000. So, you know, there's some money that we've already paid that will be coming back to us during the course of this year, which every dollar helps right now.
Okay, very
Did that all
good.
make sense?
Well, just a question here to help it make sense. All this you're talking about is going to move through in a reasonable time schedule. It's all not going to be thrown right at us at once.
The first one, yes, because the state's already approved that at the commission level.
This is over a several month period, it's just not
Right.
happening overnight.
The second one, we need to get in line with that. We have all the documentation now because it took a while to get it from Mika Myers. The third one, that really is when that project gets wrapped up and paid. Since that's a project for this fiscal year, that's toward the end of this fiscal year where that third one would be coming in. So each has a different timeline, but the first two are relatively short term.
Okay, but we're on board with the timelines and so on.
Yes.
All right.
Okay, our runway rehabilitation project that didn't happen last fall is still scheduled for May 26th and June 5th. And this past week, I coordinated with the airline to cancel all the flights on those days, because it sounds like those are really solid days at this point. So that's, there's no other update on that other than, that date's held now for a couple months, so we decided to move forward and cancel those flights. Wildlife survey, I received since the last meeting the review comments from Prina Newhoff. I still need to follow up with USDA on some of the suggested changes from that to really wrap that project up. And then I've already touched on this updated airport layout plan is the project that will get us reimbursement for that $11,000. Air service updates. So, this is what I wrote an hour ago, and 10 minutes before the meeting I was talking with Jim Gallagher, so some of this information may not even be correct anymore. So, Beach 1900 service. I was anticipating starting between this Thursday and next Thursday. Given what I just heard, there is some question on that date, and it could be as late as the 30th. Well, there are 30 days in this month. So, and I'm gonna say March 2nd then. Yeah, Jim wasn't thinking that there's only 29 days this month. I'm gonna walk through this and then I can answer questions. Basically, waiting on FAA paperwork, scheduling with FAA examiners, and a process that's called INDOC, which is basically bringing a new pilot on board through Ultimate Jet, in this case, through their process of what is required of them by the FAA. The reason of the slippage above is the captain, who has gone through training and is now qualified for flying this aircraft, was supposed to be going through that process with Ultimate Jet either last week or this week. And Ultimate Jet is saying, well, they really kind of want to bring a group of people on at the same time, so could we wait until the 25th for that? And I pretty much told Jim if that's Ultimate Jet's thought of responding to the urgency of our needs, maybe they should start looking at not continuing service here. It's just getting ridiculous that there's not universal priority trying to address our issues.
Sounds good, keep going.
The Beach 1900 first crew, as I mentioned, has completed training. The second crew starts that process today, and this is training at a firm that basically uses simulators to basically get you certified in the aircraft type. Once you get that, then you go through this other process in dock at the specific carrier. The aircraft is though ready, so that's actually movement on that. So the flight data recorder fully installed and all of the testing was completed. Last month there was still one testing issue that was to be completed. Where we are, what we've been providing as service or lack of service. So 45 North, who operates a 9-seat King Air, provided service for the first half of January. Then we basically went dark for the second half of January, from the 19th through the 31st. 45 North has been operating on a reduced schedule of 4 days per week since February 1st. And all of 45 North's operations are non-sterile, which means they don't use TSA, which, as I reported last month, is a concern because at some point we lose TSA, and then the process of getting it back is undefined, but potentially a long, drawn-out process. TSA, though, they've been willing to work with us. You know, when I communicated to them that it looked like we would be restarting on the 13th, that was encouraging to them. Their biggest concern really is just employee retention, because you have a staff of, I think they actually have 10 part-time employees right now, who really have no confidence in what their future job is, if it's existing, etc. They've been working shifts up at Traverse City to basically get their hours in, but obviously that wasn't what they were hired for, to commute up to Traverse City, and therefore management's concern around our issues are that they're going to lose their employees and then not be able to provide service. I understand completely. These issues should all go away as soon as we get sterile service, which requires the Beech 1900 being operated by Ultimate Jet to resume. And that ties into the previous parts of this.
And that's not until March 2nd or 3rd. then?
Well,
The best, the last.
yes, I'm quite confident it's not going to happen now this week, even though I had some hopes that that could happen. I think the 20th is now the earliest, so I think we're talking that 10-day period from the 20th to March 2nd as being where things will come out on that.
Well, if it happens on the 20th, that's gonna be better than in March.
Yes. Yep.
Give us a little more time to play around and think about it.
Any other questions?
Is there any more discussion on what the path would be if the board wanted to try and get it out to bid earlier? Or we had no choice in that?
I'll touch on that in a second, so hold that thought when I get to the selection process, because I've got a couple slides a little bit later on that. When it rains, it pours. So I had mentioned last month that December's flights, we were waiting on DOT to basically make some tweaks to their invoicing system so that we could submit the invoice from public charters for reimbursement under our grant. That finally all came together on the 31st, the last Friday of January. So I submitted that invoice as soon as the system allowed me to. And the issue there is that we were anticipating operating 19-seat service, so that's what they set up the billing system for. And instead of, what I asked them is just for the whole remainder of the contract, just allow either. They're, for some reason, wanting to do it on a month-by-month basis. So we went through this back in November, October, November, to getting payments out for that. They allowed that through the end of November. Obviously, at that time, we thought that was fine. Turns out, obviously, it wasn't. So, so that got submitted. But as of last Friday, a week later, that invoice still was in pending status. So I haven't looked at it today. I was going to allow through the weekend and this morning to, see if that, got done. But, this means that public charters isn't, we're not getting paid, so public charters isn't getting paid. Given everything else, that's not good on top of everything. One interesting thing is that with this submittal, DOT is for the first time ever asked me for additional documentation. They actually want to see public charters invoices as part of the submittal. I sent that to them as soon as I got that request. But why suddenly they're changing their processes, and that may be contributing to the delay. If there's good news going on, Public Charters and I have been working on the summer schedule. It is drafted. It is being submitted to DOT for their approval. As soon as we get that back, and that usually takes about 10 days, we should be able to turn on sales for summer, because we're quickly approaching the point in time where people start buying their tickets for summer. So the only update I have on this slide is that I had a good call with Cape Air. It was introductory. I definitely think they will be bidding for us. You know, it's like I rushed to schedule this call, and then it's like, okay, now hurry up and wait, because there's nothing they can do until DOT releases an RFP. So I was anticipating, and I was reporting last month, that I felt that DOT would be releasing the RFP in January. I've been monitoring the RFPs they are releasing, and they are starting to release RFPs for service starting October 1st. So basically the same timeline as ours. Ours has not yet come out. Ours tends to be a little more complicated because we're in the alternate EAS program, so therefore it's not as cookie cutter as their standard RFPs. But given that they're starting to release things due at the same time, this should be pretty close. However, I had asked them back early January, I think it was, maybe even late December, if they could release two separate RFPs, or at least allow for two separate bids for a peak season versus off-season carrier option. Their response to that was no, because we think there's enough flexibility to handle what you need with one RFP. And what they're thinking is a carrier like SkyWest could operate 2 round trips in the summer and 1 in the winter. I'm going to respond to them, assuming that the board concurs with what I'm about to describe, is I have concerns about that as their strategy for allowing us to be flexible. Here's a couple reasons why. Under Essential Air Service, we are guaranteed a minimum of 2 flights a day. What has happened is it used to be that was guaranteed, you couldn't change that. The last set of regulatory changes now allows an airport to waive that minimum, so we could get 1 flight a day. Generally, there's a reason why 2 flights a day are the minimum, because not everybody, wants to fly, 6 a.m. in the morning if that's your only flight a day. Depending on your reasons for traveling, a lot of people like to fly midday. So that depresses demand by only having once per day. Although for 8 years, that's predominantly what we've been operating. So that's one thing. The other issue is that SkyWest, who's realistically the only carrier with a regional jet that would likely bid on us, they are, in my opinion, they have known performance issues in the winter for small airports. Houghton, as part of their last selection process, requested DOT not to select SkyWest because of the poor performance they've been providing in winter. Now, Houghton winter is different than our winter, but it's still similar types of lake effect issues that we can have. Also, a community in Illinois who had SkyWest voted to not reselect them and to instead go with Cape Air because of their performance, their winter performance issues with SkyWest. Now, I don't want to necessarily blame this on SkyWest. This is more of a United issue in O'Hare, because when weather hits O'Hare, they start limiting the number of flights that can operate per hour. The flights that get eliminated are generally going to be the smallest from a revenue standpoint, so thus the regional feeders are what get impacted by that. If you combine that with only having one flight a day, we now have the potential of having a wonderful jet, but then not having flights 2 or 3 days a week, which does nothing to fill that jet. Then the third thing, and the third reason is I mentioned, and it's actually my next slide. So I mentioned this last month, is that currently our instrument landing system is not allowed to be used. There is a backup GPS-based system which provides the same level of capability, but in my discussion with our consultants, generally the regional carriers do not have as part of their operating procedures use of the GPS-based system. So this could compound the other issues by basically any cloudy day, SkyWest might not be able to operate here, which in the winter is typically every day. So I'm concerned that DOT is forcing us down this path, and it's not necessarily a good path for us to maximize our year-round service. So, assuming I don't hear any comments otherwise, my plan is to go respond back to DOT and basically say, here are the reasons we don't think what you're proposing makes sense. We really would like the ability to have a regional jet in the summer and something smaller than that in the winter. Oh, actually there was one other factor, and that is our runway length. We have the smallest runway of any northern tier airport that has regional jet service. So the smallest runway that other airports that have regional jet service is 6,400 feet, ours is 5,500. So that's another factor that, you know, and again, that doesn't mean it can't work. When Frontier was here, they didn't operate a 50 seat, they operated a 37 seat, but there's not a lot of difference between that other than, you know, a little bit of weight, a little bit of length, and they operated through the winter. But it does get into, it magnifies those other issues by having a shorter runway. You've just got less margin for safety and more times that a flight will get canceled. So, any thoughts or feedback from me on that, on my plans to go back to DOT? The reason I want to bring that to the board is I don't want to presume that the board agrees with my thoughts on this. I'm giving you all the negative reasons. There are positive reasons, because having a regional jet service year-round is a very nice thing. So if the board felt that that was paramount, and it, you know, we would risk some of these other negative things for that positive, I mean, I would certainly concur. I understand that argument as well.
So Mary, if we block ourselves with SkyWest like you're proposing there, is that gonna hurt us some other way down the road here in terms of choice of other aircraft?
I don't think so. And to me, it just gives us more flexibility.
Okay.
But, you know, what it might do is it might delay getting an RFP out, which potentially, to the question that was asked earlier about expediting a new selection, would obviously not expedite it if you're doing things to delay it getting put out.
So all these other possible carrier bids that you've got listed out here, and you've been listening for a while now,
Yep.
that still gives us a lot of choices. Each of these could be a choice, right?
Each of those could be a choice. I would expect that we will have more choices this bidding cycle than we've had in the past.
Okay.
I mean, last time I think we had 3 or 4 bidders. I would expect at least 1 or 2 more than we've had. just because the word either is or will be out there that we're looking for change, as opposed to, oh, I'm gonna put together a bid package and they're not gonna select it because they're just gonna continue with status quo. But clearly that's not the word that's out there.
Well, my feeling is, follow on your path you're proposing.
Is
SkyWest.
Is SkyWest the only one that has interline?
As it relates to Interline, SkyWest and Cape Air and Silver and Southern. And Boutique. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of those 8 do have Interlines.
That means being able to get to the.
Being able to connect on one ticket. Silver and Southern are a more questionable interline because theirs is subject to the approval of the main carrier, whereas Boutiques, Cape Air, and SkyWest are pretty much system-wide. Any other questions?
As long as we're on this, Mary, I was wondering if maybe you can, I was thinking about, we got all these airlines up here listed out there. Would it be possible, I know you've got quite a background in your system and so on here, would it be possible to make a spreadsheet of these different companies with perhaps their company headquarters, current operation sites, flyways type of aircraft? Because I know some of these we automatically canceled out because they had one engine last time around.
Right.
And number of seats and stuff like that, kind of like a little spreadsheet.
Yes,
for
I'm
us on some of
assuming,
these.
because we did that last time when
Right,
bids
right,
came in to
right.
help with the selection
But I'm
process.
thinking maybe
I'm
up
in-
front here, we can
Okay,
give us all a chance to look at that and kind of think about it before it's all here, then we have
Okay.
to go after it.
yes, I can put something together for.
Right, and I've got even a comment here, what the industry public is saying, just like you're talking about SkyWest.
Right, right.
If you got some of that stuff in your background or
I-
your history,
Yes,
pros and cons, anything, nothing, whatever it may be.
I can do that for the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes. You had on up your, the ILS problem with
Yes.
the VOR?
Yep.
What?
I didn't really talk about where we stand on that, so
You what?
I didn't talk about where we stand on that, so.
Tell me what VOR is.
Okay. Oh, what does VOR stand for? Do you know what the acronym is?
Very high frequency omni range or something like that?
It
Yeah.
is
That
basically,
little
it's a
machine
little
out there.
white building
White
over on the
building.
other side of the airport. It's basically the standard for navigation that's been in use since the 40s probably.
Yeah, probably.
And it is slowly being decommissioned and being replaced with GPS. That unit is scheduled to be decommissioned in 2023. A year and a half ago, it was determined that it is having issues and it's not accurate. So the FAA decided at that time, well, because it's going to be decommissioned in a few years, we're not going to fix it. It's older technology, understood, but it was only recently that the FAA realized that by them doing that, or not addressing that, our instrument landing approach, which has a tie to that, isn't also then available. And that is a much more critical issue. So I'm kind of waiting for the FAA to respond with how they intend to address, because this is all of this is their equipment, their processes. But ultimately, there are really, in my opinion, only two things that would satisfy us. One is, well, if the VOR is the root cause of why the ILS can't be used, fix the VOR. That basically is requesting the FAA to spend dollars to address the issue, which they're going to balk at. The other option is, and what has been talked about, is to rework the procedures, which are, that's the term for how you fly an instrument approach, not to depend on the VOR. But the standard procedure process of starting the process is typically 24 to 36 months. So, but it doesn't cost anything. So my hope is to go with the stick of saying, you've got to spend money and fix this ASAP, and hopefully they'll come back and say, well, how about if we just expedite the procedure, the new procedure? Still probably maybe 12 months, but getting the VOR fixed might be 12 months too, even. So those are really the only two things that to me are acceptable, because waiting 2 years plus for something that it's just, the FAA is falling down on the job doing what they're supposed to do. They've got all this equipment, they're just not.
And don't they have a responsibility to maintain that, since there's airlines relying on it? I know we're a small airline, but we are passenger service relying on it. It seems like they're way out of whack if they don't fix it.
Yes. And it's all because of, well, this is all the old technology and its new stuff is coming, but then you get real world scenarios where the company like SkyWest, well, every airport they fly into has this. It's what they've used forever. It's what their pilots are trained for. It's what their procedures describe how to use. To then have us as an airport with, like, we need to do things differently here.
Yeah.
Even though it's the future, it's likely to be a roadblock in them bidding. And in the summer, much less of an issue.
Well, I guess if we had the future set up for operation right now, then I would push SkyWest to say accept it or go elsewhere. But we don't have the future set up yet.
Well, no, we do have the future set up. Today, if they,
GPS?
yes, if they,
Okay,
but their regional jets might not have the equipment because,
They're still operating on
they're,
that stuff.
right. They probably, I mean, and that's, we weren't even aware of this until the end of December, when a company called Freight Runners was basically scheduled to provide substitute service that day because Ultimate Jet couldn't. And their planes aren't equipped with the equipment.
Yeah.
And it's like, what do you mean you can't land? Ultimate Jet's been landing. It's like, but Ultimate Jet has the equipment and their procedures allow them to use it. So it's a weird in-between point. And I understand the arguments on all sides, but it doesn't address our needs. So.
And that's what, when you made this report, that clears that up for me, because I was thinking, oh my goodness, we need that ILS system, operating, and we need, 100 and some feet on our, on our runway. I mean, those are two major issues for our airport.
Yep. For us to be where we want to be.
Right. Move 31 a little bit.
Well, I mean,
well, that's
part of
That's
buying
right.
part of buying
They are.
your
I
object
forget about
property
that.
is to allow us to
Yeah.
do that in the future.
That's part of the relocation expenses and so on
Yeah.
for that property that we got out there to just smooth out the runway a little further.
If there are any other questions on that, I can move on to marketing. So we basically had our marketing spend dialed pretty much down to practically nothing since October 1st. We did meet last week, and as soon as we can get confidence that we're going to have the schedule operating as published, and we're not going to be disappointing people, which still a moving target, but as soon as we have that pinned down, we're going to basically do a couple pronged approach here. One is through our email database, which is mostly past customers, to go out with basically a big apology and word that such that, in light of the poor experiences and the issues, here's a fair sale, going out there, for all flights throughout the spring. At the same time, on social media, digital platforms where we're basically pushing more, kind of reaching out to non-customers or non-past customers. Obviously, we don't need to apologize because they're not necessarily aware that there have been issues, but basically promote a fair sale to that audience. And then with the summer schedule coming out roughly in this window as well, a week or so after those initial things go out, then go out with a secondary, and now our summer schedule's open, buy now, get your best prices, buy early, et cetera, and just really try to return on marketing to kind of get us back to a normal state of affairs. So that's where we were in our meeting last week, and we are also, in the marketing budget this year, is an update to the website, because right now our website is predominantly an airline website that also has some airport-related information on it. Likely any carrier we end up going with is going to have a much more well-developed airline identity and presence, such that our website needs to be an airport website, obviously with links and referrals to the airline website, but not kind of this predominantly being in a place where you buy your tickets. So we've got to rethink that in anticipation of that transitioning to the new carrier this year. And that is the end of my report. Any other questions?
One question, Ultimate Air, when do they start flying again?
March 11th,
Okay, March 11th?
yes,
Ultimately with the jets?
yes.
Oh, okay.
Now, but again, that's not on our current published schedule. So they are available to operate flights once a day, except Sunday. But they can only operate midday. So
Okay.
if we start utilizing them, then we have to go and notify passengers, oh, your flight has been rescheduled, you've now got a 5-hour different flight time, and if you've booked a connecting flight, oh, too bad, you're out of luck. Which is where we were basically through November and December. We were operating regular flights on the days, we just were inconveniencing passengers by making them not be the times they booked.
So if the Beach 1900
Yes,
starts flying like March 3rd,
yes.
then also by the end of March, we can have the Ultimate Jet flying in also, or in lieu of?
The idea would be not to be utilizing the jet.
Okay, until,
The 1900 being the predominant
Right,
air
right.
carrier until we get to summer.
and the summer schedule starts in June?
Yes.
Okay, that was kind of my question on the one there.
After June 5th.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay, that does it, thank you.
Okay. No, I have not. I think this is more garden variety of illness going around.
Okay.
Barry, I have a comment, and that is, are we gonna have enough flights to retain TSA? We were considering that as a serious problem. I don't know if it's improved or not.
Yes and no. I mean, it is a potential problem if public charters fails to deliver on the ever-changing dates. Realistically, we have, I would say, until the end of March. I think with political pressure, there probably is, that's not a fixed date, like I thought it was earlier. In the past, we've been told, you've got 90 days. Now it's more open-ended, but, you know, it doesn't go on forever. At some point, they reassign staff, they pull equipment out, and we don't have them anymore. What I mentioned last month and is still the case is Ultimate Jet being available with the jet March 11th is really a fallback position. Everything else falls through. It addresses the TSA concern. From a customer service standpoint, it's still suboptimal because everyone that's booked through the spring now basically has to get rebooked for a different flight time. But it's limping along. The 1900 really is, and everything has been designed around that happening 6 months ago. And everything else that we're experiencing is a result of that not happening. So the problem is predicting the future. So given what I know, we should be okay, but I mean, I would have never dreamed that we would be where we are back in August and September when this all started. On that front, though, I will say is that Jeff Dantz has already, we've already had one meeting with Representative Bergman on this topic. So he and his staff are aware and is, lined up to, apply any pressure if necessary to prevent some of these dire occurrences happening with TSA if that is necessary. And we had that call last week. Did that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, I think it helps a little, yeah.
Okay.
Can I ask, because I don't know planes, but how many seats does the 1900 have?
19.
19
Yes.
flight
Yep.
seats, okay.
That's what I was asking for this other report, so everybody can kind of get a feel for what size plane we're talking about and so on. Okay, moving on. I was just gonna say, Mark, yes, what Barry was talking about, yes, we had a phone conversation with Congressman Bergman. I think the conversation went well, and at least he's aware of our situation and will be there for some support down the road.
Oh, that's good news.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of challenges ahead here. Not only do we have to retain TSA, but we need to obtain air service. We should be able to do that. We need to continue to make improvements to our facilities. Hopefully we can be doing that too. And then we're also a little bit anchored in the comment that Barry made that is probably really true. We have regressed for 5 years from all that work we've done to get to, I guess, at the point that we're at now. So it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a real challenge. I think Barry is going to be doing a major job on this too. And I think he's very competent and capable. And I'm hoping very much that we can keep our air service and provide it to the people in our community and to other communities too.
Thank you, Mark.
And that's it for me.
Okay. Any new business?
Yes. Well,
Well, that's
No,
part of
the-
the old business.
the item, so the revised grant, or the grant addendum is technically new business. I'm not sure when we amended the agenda where we put it, but I'm assuming we put it under new business. So this Exhibit 1 is really showing the changes that the grant amendment that MDOT Aeronautics Commission approved on basically a week ago on the 31st. And the total amendment is kind of that middle black line, amendment relocation costs, $50,012. But that corresponds to two items. One is the actual bill for the relocation costs, which I believe is the number down, yeah, I shouldn't say that. I can get, it's 44,000 something. I thought I had it here, but I don't.
Bill number 3.
Adjusted $44,550.
I'm just reading that, and I'm not sure, given that date, I don't think that, I think that's just coincidence that it's also a $44,000 number. So there's that, and then the remaining bit of that is the roughly $6,000 that we were not reimbursed for in the original submittal because the grant amount didn't allow that amount to be reimbursed. So, and again, it would be ideal if we had all of the formal paperwork, but short of having that, short of calling a special meeting when we get it later this week, I would request that the board authorize the board chair to sign the amendment to the grant agreement as has been approved by the Aeronautics Commission.
Which is what you just handed out here.
This is a piece of it.
A piece.
The rest of the paperwork, it's, you know, these things, they tend to be like 20-page documents with all the legalese on them. But this is the numbers page. And that $50,012 is the key number there.
And that's a real number.
Yes.
Okay. So what you want is a motion and approval to go ahead and sign and process this paperwork as it comes through.
Correct.
Do I hear a motion for such an activity?
Yes.
Okay, do I hear a second?
A second.
I believe we want a roll call for that.
Mr. Suda,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Haw,
Yes.
Mr. Dance, Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Okay. Takes care of that right there, right for you?
Yep.
Okay. And now we'll move on down to old business. We've already had the addition of the bill of sale adjustment that we already did. And now we got to talk about the lease agreement that's, I believe everybody's got, from Mr. Shively.
So if I can start off.
Go ahead.
I sent this out on Friday over the weekend. Mr. Suda actually emailed me back with some questions, and he found a couple typos. So I have actually made a couple corrections. Purely typos, the numbering was not 1, 2, 3, 4. There were 2 places in the numbering that were out of sync. There was 2 9s and I think 2 6s. So I've gone through and renumbered them consistently. So that is what I would recommend the board would approve, that what you were sent with those renumbering changes. Also, did you read my response? And
I
do
did,
you want to,
with regard to the,
the square footage of the,
square footage.
so I don't know if my answer was sufficient, or if you want to ask it here and I can, you know.
No, I really don't, I don't know, I guess, well, the concern is the amount of land behind the hangar. And Barry had said, well, that would be for the, if needed, for the utility to set a transformer. I don't think that the utility would in fact set another transformer for that as long as it would be a single-phase service that Mr. Shiley would probably want.
Right.
If you wanted a three-phase service, then that would cost him probably a lot of money that he wouldn't want to pay. But I don't believe that they would be setting another transformer. I think they could,
They could
if
just
they
come off
needed
the
to,
existing.
they'd come off the one that's there, and if
You
they had to, they could.
Another thing I was
upsize
thinking
it.
of is, you know, potential propane tank but we've got natural gas here, so it just, the reason that that back was larger would be to accommodate any sort of utilities because we would want them on his leased property, not ours.
Absolutely, but I don't think that the utility, if they knew that that was a leased piece of property, that they would set a transformer there anyway. I
Okay.
don't think they would. I think that would have to be on the airport premises, not leased. At least that's the way I believe that the utility has in the past done things and probably would in that case there, being a small service.
Bill, is that the 15 feet on the west
Yeah,
side you're talking about?
Yeah,
Okay.
his question was why 6 on the front, 15 on the back? The 6 on the front corresponds to the depth of the existing concrete pad.
Mhm.
So I kept it at that so that over the course of the lease, if the asphalt needs to get replaced, it's clear as to whose responsibility it is to, you know, pay for that, as opposed to if it went further out front, then suddenly, well, you're responsible for that 10 feet, but the airport's responsible for the rest. This just, there's a good dividing line because there's asphalt and then there's concrete, and that's really the difference as to where that 6 feet comes from.
But with the door opening there would infringe on the airport property.
Right, with 6 feet out there, it doesn't do that now.
So, yeah,
Good thought.
it's going to take more than 6 foot to get the door open.
I've got no problem with 15 feet in the back. Anybody else? So we'll leave that the way it is, Terry. Okay, on page 4, then we've got 2 6s there, so what do we got there? Is 6 7?
If you, I didn't print out enough for everybody, but I did print out
So everything just jogs on
A
down
couple.
number-wise?
red lines that show. Now, these are actually all the changes since what we got back from the attorney. So it includes the renumbering changes, but it also includes a few other things that were noticed by either Ryan or myself as we reviewed. One was his address got wrong. 2 was the addition of the actual square footage, which we were just talking about. And then I think the third one was George had the payments for the lease being monthly, but it's really annually, so I adjusted that wording. I think those were the only changes from what we got back from legal. But yeah, for the numbering, from 6 on, everything is renumbered, so the second 6 becomes 7, 8, etc.
One more thing on the back side of this. I'm just gonna say it, does this should be notarized by a notary public?
Well, here, let me, and I don't think this was in your packet. It has been in your packet in the past, though.
Oh, okay.
And this is the actual bill of sale, and that is notarized.
Right, but what about the lease?
So I don't think,
Should that be
we
notarized?
generally don't, I mean, no other leases can
Okay,
be notarized.
okay.
But the actual bill of sale,
I was just noticing going back there, it looked like the lease for Ted Aaron's was notarized
that, it may have been, yeah,
in the packet, right?
right.
In fact, there was quite a few signatures on it. So, I don't know, does it need to have a notary, be notarized, or?
Our attorney didn't think so,
Well,
thus
that's
it's
what
not
I'm
there,
saying,
but.
you know, in fact, even like on the Ted Aaron's one, it had down there, it was prepared by XYZ legal firm, and there's nothing on this, so apparently George feels it's not necessary anymore.
I'm not a lawyer, so I cannot answer that question.
Yeah,
Well,
we
that's
do
what I'm
lots
saying.
of
What?
contracts, we don't
Okay,
have.
okay, just a thought, just thought I'd bring it up. Otherwise,
Just as long as your board gives the permission to sign for
Okay.
it.
otherwise
Or
I'm,
signs.
otherwise I'm okay with it. Any other comments, thoughts? Andrew?
Barry, did we put to bed, is there gonna be an easement needed or no easement needed for the meter?
Consumers has not indicated one way or another yet on that.
But I think that extra area distance around there will provide easement for a meter.
I just don't know if they're gonna have to trench across
Oh,
the
okay.
airport's property to put the meter in, and I
Okay.
didn't know if that would require an easement approved by the board for them to do the trenching.
I think,
There's a transformer that's set.
It's pretty close
Yeah,
to.
It's real
right.
close, and like I say, unless he would be wanting to put in a three-phase service, which I can't fathom that.
Right.
I mean, worst comes to worst, they just have to upsize the transformer, pull the transformer off the foundation, put a big one on, and then run their service entrance on over to it. The location either that they select or that's mutually agreed upon by whomever's in charge.
so you don't anticipate a problem.
I would think absolutely not.
Okay,
Unless, like I say, for whatever strange reason, if he would think he would need a three-phase service, which I can't fathom that.
Andrew, take care of your question. Any other concerns, questions?
I'll make a motion to approve the Shively lease agreement as amended with the proper numbering and the other changes as presented by Barry.
I'll second that.
And, bill of sale should go with it.
Or separate, I mean,
We'll do it
both need to
separate.
be.
Let's do it separate, we'll do a roll call on each and do them separate.
And then if I could just request that the motion include authorizing the board chair to sign.
So moved.
Do I have a second to that?
Yeah.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mr. Suda,
I'd like to abstain from voting on this because I wasn't appointed by the commission until a date after what this is on here. I would like to not vote one way or the other. I don't feel comfortable voting one way or the other. That's
Okay,
right, sure.
that's fine with me.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Goodman,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Hawes.
Yes. Okay, moving on, could I have a motion to approve the bill of sale as presented?
I'll make that motion and also authorize the board chair to sign.
Second.
Okay. Ready for a roll call and bill of sale approval?
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Mr. Bergstrom,
Yes.
Mr. Hawes,
Yes.
Mr. Gentili,
Yes.
Mr. Suda,
You
So
said
abstain.
and Ms. Goodman.
Yes.
so moved. Okay. I believe that kind of wraps us up on the agenda here, except for comments by the board members here. We're around the circle here.
I will not be at the March meeting, I'll be in Colorado with my kids.
Okay.
Did you get my message? About being late?
No, I did.
Oh,
Sorry.
I'm glad you could make it. Yeah, you can make it anyway.
can't make it at noon, just come on, wherever you want.
You know,
Karen, anything? I got nothing. Meeting adjourned.